Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Steve with the Interrupted Podcast, and thank you for tuning in to another week, another episode, another powerful conversation. The whole idea is today, your day is interrupted by positive information, educational information that'll help set you on the path to accomplish all you want to accomplish by being prepared for life's interruptions. And that is exactly what's at the core of this show and what you're going to hear from my guests. Today's guest is an amazing man who has accomplished so much already in his life. My guest today is Eric Rittmeyer. He is a speaker. He is an author. He is an expert when it comes to emotional intelligence and mental toughness. He coaches businessmen and women all over the country. You've probably seen him on many of the major media networks as he is constantly just sharing bits of wisdom as it relates to emotional intelligence, decision making. You're going to hear how passionate he is about everything that he tackles and how much he wants to have such a positive impact in other people's lives. So it was a real privilege to sit down with him. Before I get into his bio, I just want to take a minute to remind you as it relates to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribed so you're getting all the latest and up-to-date information, and be sure that you're following me over on Facebook or on Instagram or on LinkedIn. Those are the primary platforms that you'll find me on. And then another area that we are so close to hitting our first milestone, so to speak, with YouTube. I'm working to build that both for Interrupted Outdoors and the Interrupted Podcast to be pushing the show out to as many people as possible. And that's driven by a number of factors. But your support by simply following the show on YouTube, by just clicking that little red bell at the bottom of the browser there when the videos pop up, would be go a long way to help support what we're doing. And by all means, please make sure you find your way over to the landing page at interruptme.org, where you'll find information related to the podcast, to Interrupted Man, which is a mastermind group that I'm currently revamping and looking into some new options for as we're approaching a new season of that. So be on the lookout for things to come related to that. And then, of course, Interrupted Outdoors, where all the hunting, fishing, just my hobbies, passions that help reset and recalibrate my life, I like to share with all of you. So be sure you're tuned in to those as well. So lots of ways that you can connect with the mission and the vision of helping you overcome difficult circumstances through education and conversation coming your way. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest from his bio. He is a former U.S. Marine and expert in the field of mental toughness and emotional intelligence. He is a professional speaker for the past decade and is a regular guest on all of the major television outlets, including Fox, CNN, NBC, and ABC. Eric also is the author of the book, The Emotional Marine, 68 Mental Toughness and Emotional Intelligence Secrets to Make Anyone Instantly Like You. Phenomenal book. Here it is right here. We talk about it quite a bit on the show. Pick up a copy of that, which we'll have all that linked up in the show notes where you can get that copy. He speaks to audiences all over this country, teaching executives, sales professionals how to overcome the limits brought on by fear and emotion and replace them with a clear, concise, critical thinking to get results. He also uses his platform to spread the word about a pro-police movement sweeping across the nation called We Back Blue, where he serves as the director of communications, and their mission is to let law enforcement know that they are loved, honored, and supported unconditionally by the community. So he talks about that at the end of the show, and he is extremely passionate about that, to be giving back in that way. So just a phenomenal conversation. I'm really excited to get into this show. So enjoy this conversation with Eric Rittmeyer. Eric, hey, welcome to the Interrupted Podcast, brother. It's awesome to have you on this morning. I'm excited for this conversation.
Steve, likewise, man. I was jacked up. I couldn't wait for this. It's been on my schedule, man. I'm like, I can't wait. I woke up this morning, did my hair. I was ready to go, man. Thanks for having me.
Right on. Hey, it's looking good, man. The lighting's perfect this morning. So no, that's awesome. When I got to hear you talk at a seminar, it sounds like even just working out some really upcoming talks that are going to be really effective for some communities that you work with, man. I was just stoked, man. What your energy that you brought to the room and your passion, it definitely shined through, and it was contagious in the room, and it was what I felt was in direct alignment with the mission here of the podcast. So I thank you for agreeing to come on.
I appreciate the kind words, Steve. I'm hardcore, right? I'm a little biased because it's my topic. This whole emotional intelligence thing for me, I live it and I breathe it, right? I just feel like it's one of those things when you feel so strongly, it's like I just got to stand on the rooftops and shout. So when I got the invite from you, it was very awesome, man. Because I love your audience. I love everything you do. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
100%. Well, man, let's dive in. I've been since I've heard your talk. I've been thinking, at what point did you arrive at thinking this way about life? Right? Was this something that was just innate in you, and you felt a passion from your earliest memories, or is it something? There were some growing pains involved. How did you arrive there?
It's so funny, Steve. Like I wrote in my book, right? It's like I didn't know what I was good at. Like I'm one of these firm believers, and we're all born with something, right? Whether it be artistic, whether we're athletic, whether we're good at fixing cars, whether we can play the drums, whatever. We're all born with these things. So for a very substantial part of my life, I had no idea like what it was. Like I was good at stuff, right? But I wasn't like really good at anything. I'm like, what is it? I knew there had to be something. So it took
Mm-hmm.
me until probably like my early 30s, I would say, and finally I was like, I'm good with people. Like I connect with people. Like, what is it? What is this component? So I started researching more, learning more. I recognized that I self-assessed myself, right? So I scored myself pretty highly. It was emotional intelligence. So I started researching it. I started just watching the people that I was hiring and firing in my business, people that I was communicating with. And all of a sudden I realized that we're humans. We're hardwired to feel first and think later. One of the most important things that we do is we have emotion. We express emotion. It's part of our evolutionary advantage. Nobody understood this stuff. Nobody got this stuff. So I'm like, why is it so different for me? That put me on my mission to start paying a lot of attention to people, start recognizing what the traits were in people that made them very likable, or on the opposite side of the coin, the people that I didn't like. What is it
Mm-hmm.
about these people? And I just came up with this concept of, hey, it's all about emotional intelligence. It's all about how we make people feel. I wrote a book about it. It's written in crayon. It's got big pop-up pictures when you open it up, right? You've seen it.
That you
So
didn't
that's
eat.
exactly. So that was my mission. That's why I'm here. It's just one of those things where I feel like I have a message to spread. I feel like there's something that I can provide to people to make them, to help them with their relationships, friendships, with their spouses. So I'm on this mission to spread the word, man.
Yeah, right on. What if we're wired for this? Why are we so bad at it?
It's like this philosophy. I'm on the process of writing my second book, actually, right? And part of my book is going to be the nature versus nurture concept. If you ever,
Okay.
read anything or study anything about that, like which one supersedes which, right? So it's a good question, Steve, because empathy, I'm very big on empathy, right? So this is a big thing I'm into right now. Are we born as empathetic humans or are we taught that? In other words, do we all have the same level of capacity to be empathetic towards others, or is it something that can be taught? I use the
Mm-hmm.
pit bull analogy, right? Like a fighting dog. A pit bull is a fighting dog. It's in its blood to fight. If that pit bull was raised in a household with 7-pound chihuahuas and you rub its belly every day and it has no idea, does it ever become a fighting dog, right? So it's one of those things for me personally. I believe anybody can increase their levels of emotional intelligence. It's why I'm so infatuated with it. IQ has nothing to do with it. Book smarts have nothing to do with your level of emotional intelligence. So I believe it's something we all have the capacity for. It does have to be nurtured. And most importantly, we have to recognize these things. We have to be self-aware. Lots of people don't understand how emotions work.
Yeah. Self awareness is definitely a buzz topic, I think, right now that comes out. And I think it's in some level misunderstood because we're not able to mine into it at a great level without maybe professional help. I know there's all kinds of surveys and things out there. What is a way that we can start to evaluate where we are at on an emotional scale? Because we say like, hey, I'm feeling this way, or I had this response to someone during some type of communication engagement, and I need to look closer at that, why I maybe got angry, or why I felt sad after that, or why I felt inadequate and my capabilities weren't there. How do we start to take a deep dive into self-assessment, rather than just being like, oh yeah, I need to think about how I feel. It's like, okay, great, but what are the tools out there that we can be efficient with it and then actually turn it into action? Because that's the piece that we really want, right? It does no good if we've identified the problem and then can't actually move to developing those skills in a better way.
You just hit on two of the main components of emotional intelligence, Steve. It's self-awareness and self-regulation. There's also motivation, empathy, and social skill, but self-awareness and self-regulation. So number one, let's look at emotional intelligence, right? So EQ on its face is all about a subjective experience, something that happens to us that we subjectively experience. It's a physiological response and then a behavioral reaction. So when something happens to us, our body automatically triggers, then we react to it. When we react, it's emotion-based, okay? As creatures, as humans, we're hardwired to feel first and think later. When something happens to us, we're going to react. We really have very minimal control over that, especially if we don't recognize it. When we respond, we process information logically. We can formulate a logic-based response. You being in law enforcement know how critically important this is. If you're put in a situation and you react emotionally, bad things are going to happen probably about 98% of the time. Okay, that's why it's so critically important in law enforcement and these careers and these jobs that are life and death situations. So when it comes to the self-awareness piece, I think where it starts is looking at our current relationships. Do we have these deep relationships? I talk about 4 quarters versus 100 pennies in my book. Hey, how are yous? I call these hey, how are you relationships. These are your pennies, right? Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? Then we have the 4 quarters, which are the quality over quantity. Look at your current, look at where you are from a relationship standpoint. You'll get a pretty good vibe of how you are. And then ask others too, Steve. This is kind of weird, but ask people, like, how do you perceive me? Like, am I kind? Am I nice? Do I listen when I talk? That's the other big problem. We listen with the intent to reply, not with the intent
Oh,
to understand. That's
yep.
just America 101. It's all these little things, but the self-awareness piece is so critically important. And it's not very easy to define, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, the soundbite culture is what we live in, whether it's coming through a platform or whether it's we. I think a lot of times take those sound bites we pull from social media and our the world around us, and then we insert it into conversations with maybe good friends. And a lot of times it doesn't come off really well because we start cherry picking what everybody else believes, and I think we get lost. We don't have our identity anymore, right? Because we're trying to just pull in what everybody else thinks and feels, and then we get lost in like, who am I? What do I actually believe? And I think that gets my perception is that is at the core of emotional intelligence. You have to understand your own ethos to be able to understand how you feel about things, and that's a hard journey.
Oh, it absolutely is. And it all starts internally, right? And here's the thing, and I don't want to try to, point at anything, whatever, but if you look at media right now, I mean, media has just done a very good job of instilling this mass confusion and this mass hate. Well, why would media want to instill this confusion? Because if you're confused, you can't be clear. If you can't be clear, you can't unify. So if they can
Mm,
prevent the clarity, they can prevent the unity. What we have right now is a society that unfortunately is afraid to express how they feel. This is called preference falsification. This is when you say to me, hey, Eric, who'd you vote for? And I say, I don't know, whoever you voted for, right? I know my preference, but I'm afraid to articulate that out of fear of some sort of retribution. So we have a society right now that gets their information from a little soundbite. They don't question it ever. They don't look at it through the lens of objective reality. They ask themselves no critical thinking questions. So what we have right now is a whole generation of people that are allowing what they feel in their hearts to supersede what they see with their eyes. So it's all now about subjective perceptions overriding objective observations. What that
mm-hmm.
means is what I see with my own 2 eyes means nothing. The only thing that matters is what I feel in my heart. This feeling in my heart that's tied to nothing fact-based normally supersedes any fact. And the minute someone like me comes along and produces a fact that conflicts with that belief system, you go off the deep end. You derail. You now become emotionally reactive. You're now saying things and doing things because you're intoxicated in emotion. Logic goes out the window. There's nothing I can say or do that's going to override what you feel in your hearts. That's a major, major problem.
Yeah. Well, how do you rewind then? So like when we're engaged in the conversation and all of a sudden you hit something that I don't believe in, and all of a sudden I feel that the fight or flight axis go off the rails, and instantly I get flush and I feel anger coming up. What do we put in place to say, all right, this is becoming an internal battle, and I need to keep it external. I need to keep my focus on, hey, this is a conversation. I need to now listen again. I need to reevaluate. It's not, I can't get anywhere being angry, right? So how do we get that in check? And I think that's what's getting lost is people recognize that they're getting emotional, but maybe they can't identify what that emotion is and then the tool to put that in check.
Sure. Yeah, I believe that people are not aware of their emotions, Steve, and I think that's the problem. And I refer to this as suspending our disbeliefs. So when we're in situations where people say things that trigger us, there's going to be something that's said, something that's done. We all have these things internally. The minute that trigger's pulled, what's going to follow it? It's going to be an emotion-based reaction. If we're not aware of that, if we can't recognize that, we're not going to be able to set aside these disagreements that we have. So this is compartmentalization, right? You know this in law enforcement. You have to compartmentalize your emotions. You can't allow what happened on call A to affect call B. You can't allow what happened on the job to affect what happens at home. You have to compartmentalize. Then once you recognize these things that trigger you, that set you off, then what we have to do is systematically desensitize our brains to it. Meaning that when scenario A happens, this is how I respond to it. This is what's causing this feeling. Now I have to desensitize my brain to that feeling. So next time I'm in the situation, I'm not going to do something that's going to ruin a relationship. I'm not going to do something in your field that's going to cost somebody's life. I'm able to shelf that. If we don't recognize it and understand it, and I think the biggest problem is people don't know that they're driven by emotion. So they just fly off the deep end without recognizing it. If we recognize it and understand it and start realizing that every single action that we take has impacts on other people, if we start realizing that everything we say and do has a reaction on other people, we'll start to look more internally and start to get better at regulating what we say and do.
And what I hear in that is that mental simulation is really important, that I'm rehearsing and thinking through these different relationships and correct me where my mind goes when I'm thinking about that is, say I'm going to be going to some networking event, or I'm going to be going out to dinner with some friends, and thinking through, hey, this is what I know about this person. This is some of the things they believe. This is some of the topics that may come up. This is what is my current state. Did I just have an argument with my spouse? Did my kids just make me angry? Did the babysitter not show up on time? And being able to have some forethought prior to going into a conversation, particularly a heated one, or has the capacity to become that way.
You spot on, Steve. That's exactly what I'm saying. You are preparing for it, right? So you sweat in practice so you don't bleed in war. Okay. So you're prepared for these situations. I talk a lot about this around the holidays when I talk about dealing with difficult family members. How do we handle them? What do we know? It's the cousin Eddies, right?
Yeah.
It's fools. It's, rub him on his belly, Clark. Like, you got to be ready for the cousin Eddies. If you're not ready for them, you walk in, it's like this storm, right? And all of a sudden, before you know it, you're saying this, you're doing that. There's no quote they use. They say, don't ever, ever argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. This is what happens, right? We get in these situations. I get in these situations where I'm dealing with TV shows, radio shows with people who have conflicting points of view. They try to drag me down to their levels and they beat me with experience. I'm not used to that stuff, right? So if we can recognize it, acknowledge it, and then understand and realize why we're reacting the way we do, get a grasp on that. What is it about this one thing that triggers me? What is it about the word they say that upsets me? What is it about the action they take? Once we recognize that, then we can start to dissect that, get to the root cause of it, and then be mentally prepared. So when we're in those situations and something said, it's not the first time we've heard it. We've heard it many times in our brain before. We're prepared for it.
Yeah, that the preparation, oftentimes I think that creates a lot of anxiety going into these conversations, which can in some ways fuel it negatively, right? It almost acts like a modulator or gain almost, because it can ramp things up, because if you see the train coming, it's like you a lot of times you freeze and you don't know where to go, and that's just uncomfortable, which is at the core of what we're trying to do, right? With the Interrupted podcast, right? These interruptions are constantly hitting us. They come by way of conversation. They come by way of social interaction with nonverbals, and we have to be able to prepare, because the consequence of not preparing is extremely great.
You bring up a great point, Steve. And this is something I talk a lot about too. I do a lot with boys and emotions and emotional suppression. I've written papers on this, right? Here's the thing that people have to recognize about emotions. 100% of what you feel is okay. If you feel like you want to punch a wall, if you feel like you want to cry, if you feel like you want to cuss, if you feel any of those things, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. The difference, the key, the important part is it's how we respond to those feelings. Okay, so instead of trying to stop or suppress or turn off the feeling, which we can't do, it's impossible to do. But that's what society's taught us to do. Just turn off the feeling, Steve. You're at work now, so I don't care what you just turn off. You can't do it. So instead, if we can teach people these mechanisms, if we can give them what I call an emotional vocabulary or a feelings vocabulary, this is why I feel how I feel. Not I'm angry, I'm pissed. Take it a step further. This is why I feel the way I feel, or this is what caused me to feel the way I feel. But if people can start recognizing that all those feelings are okay, especially for our kids, all your feelings are okay. Let's talk about it. And let me give you some constructive ways to articulate how you feel in a way other than violence, anger. It's the suppression thing, right? I'm a lot older than you, Steve. When I was a kid, my parents used to say, don't hold in your sneezes. If you do, your lungs are going to collapse, right? It's the same concept with emotions. You can't expect people to turn off something that we're going to do no matter what because we're hardwired to do it. Tell them to hold it in. Don't give them any outlet at all for how to express their feeling. And then what do you think is going to happen? Okay. I mean, I do a lot with mass shootings. I do a lot with all these murder. Again, I don't have the silver bullet for anything, but I can tell you at the core of this are people who have never been taught how to deal with others they don't like, how to deal with adversity, how to express their disagreement with somebody, how to handle their anger in any way other than violence. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, walking into a conversation, a lot of times our agenda is to convert that other person's thought rather than to feed them maybe how a perspective, right? And if we only give them our perspective but we don't change their mind, we feel like that's failure. And I disagree with that. I think the point of the conversation is that you can give a perspective, you can hear a perspective, and then you can assess that, and whether that changes your mind, ultimately it's not. But trying to change someone's mind in the 10-minute conversation or hour and a half you spend with them, I feel like that's an unrealistic expectation, unless you're walking into that conversation with this level of, hey, let's make an agreement that we can arrive and have consensus. There's a lot to that.
Well, and again, at the core of emotional intelligence here, Steve, it's how we perceive, express, and respond to emotion. So someone
Mm-hmm.
who's very high in emotional intelligence is very good at dealing with the situation and going in real time, picking up on nonverbal cues, picking up on tones of voice, and then adjusting the way that we communicate with that person based on what we're picking up from them. Now, I'm
Mm.
not saying this is you don't become a doormat at this point. You don't let people walk all over you, but you have to be very fluid. You have to be able to pick up on that person. Self-awareness is not just us. Self-awareness is other people as well. So people who are very high in self-awareness and emotional intelligence, they have control over their feelings 99% of the time. Not all the time. We all lose it sometimes, but they're equally as good at controlling other people. And it's funny because people tell me, like, Eric, you're just emotionally manipulative and you're trying to manipulate these people emotionally. I'm like, but I'm not. But emotional intelligence is all about helping people and guiding people to do things we want them to do. I'm not saying that in a negative way, but if we can't connect with them, it's like I wrote in the book too about the golden rule, right? We've all heard the golden rule. Treat others the way we want to be treated. In my book, I wrote about the platinum rule. Treat others the way they want to be treated. And that's a whole different level of component. When you start dealing with each person individually, not using this one blanket, I'm going to deal with every person the same way, you start at that point to become like a chameleon. And again, I'm not saying to stray away from your core beliefs. I'm not saying to lose your authenticity by no stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is start to mold into this person. So now you're communicating. It's called resonance. It's called resonance, right? I wrote up here about this also. When you resonate, we're all vibrations. When we're on the same level of vibration, we resonate. It's like the opera singer that goes, yeah, and the glass breaks, right? That was the same frequency they were on. So it's the
Yeah.
same thing in communication. We have to resonate with them. We only do that by being aware of our being aware of our emotions, regulating our emotions, and then also being aware of their emotions and attempting to regulate theirs as well.
Yeah, no, being able to pick up on, the just that it's almost not tangible a lot of times, is trying to feel like, hey, something's amiss, or it feels really good when something is, has synergy, right? And it's working so well together. That feels good in a conversation. What so thinking about emotional intelligence, and how does that work with this issue of confirmation bias that we deal with in society? Because I feel like there isn't some overlap there, in our emotional responses and even preparation to what we believe our worldview, and then how that ultimately resolves, and how sometimes in many cases, that confirmation bias keeps us from having good control, because we see that, aha, I knew it. And that doesn't tend to lead to good things when we feel that way, to have that personal win.
Yeah, and here's the key, Steve, right? It's part of the program, if you remember from when I spoke a couple weeks ago or whatever. This is the issue, right? Reticular activating system. We talked
Mm.
briefly about that. It's where
Yeah.
it's a bundle of neurons that sits on the stem of your brain that filters out information you're looking for. So your back of brain tries to find a way to locate these things that you're subconsciously looking for. So our brains do the same thing. When we believe something, we have this confirmation bias that says, I believe this. This is what I believe. And then our brain goes out and tries to find things that automatically confirm what we're doing. This is called reactive devaluation, which is another major problem right now in politics. It's a type of cognitive bias where I'm going to automatically react and devalue your statement because I don't like you. Okay, so what happens is we have people that we have opposing points of view with. Our brain does not allow us to accept ideas, thoughts, possible solutions, all because we don't like this person. It's called reactive devaluation. So the problem is when we have these belief systems, our brain shuts down to any type of information that conflicts with it. Because a lot of times these belief systems we have are tied to warm, fuzzy feelings. And the minute a fact comes that conflicts with that belief system, we go in the shutdown mode. This is called cognitive bias, right? So, or cognitive dissonance, I should say, is when our brain has a conflict. So if I'm a smoker, let's say, I know smoking is bad. I know it's bad for my health. That creates a cognitive dissonance in my mind. I know it's bad, but I'm still smoking. So what my brain does is my brain finds a way to make it okay to get rid of that dissonance. So what I'll say is, yes, I'm smoking, but I'm losing weight from smoking, which means I'm staying healthier. That's cognitive dissonance. So what our brains do is they don't allow us to see these opposing points of view because it conflicts with warm, fuzzy feelings. Our brain knows there's a conflict. Our brain tries to correct it. It corrects it by finding things that confirm what we believe that probably aren't accurate.
Well said, man. You articulated that well. I don't even have anything to add to that. That felt good. Would you take a moment to talk about the levels of awareness? I loved how you shared about these levels, and how it's really applicable, that I think we can apply it to any environment we walk in to help set the stage even for how a conversation hopefully will go.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously in my program you sat through, I break it down to just 5 different levels of conscious awareness. There are many, many thousands of them. I use the socioeconomic labels. I say poverty class, working class, middle class, upper class, world class thinking has nothing to do with socioeconomic status, but everybody can relate. So if I say you're a world class thinker, you know what I'm talking about. If I say you're a middle class thinker, you know what I'm talking about. Again, has nothing to do with dollars and cents, nothing to do with socioeconomic status. But what I found and what I try to do and what I think is important for all of us to recognize is we all operate from one of these levels of conscious awareness. And everything we do, our actions, our thoughts, our beliefs, everything we do, where we are in life is all revolving around a thought process, our level of consciousness. When we think things a certain way, and really that's what it all boils down to, because it all matters how we think. And I know it sounds bubblegum and high fives and all that kind of stuff. But when it gets to like especially middle class thinkers, which my studies and my research has found makes up about 70% of the population, not just the companies I speak with, but this is the comfort zone people. These are the ones that I just want to be comfortable. I'm not trying to win at anything. I'm just trying not to lose. I want to race through life and arrive at death as safely as I possibly can without any type of harm, mentally, emotionally, physically. That's a middle class thinker. A lot of people operate from there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who just remain there and never get into their actual strengths. They're hyper critical to their weaknesses, and they tend to kind of downgrade what they're good at, all because they're afraid. They're afraid of being rejected. They process information emotionally. Then you go up to like the world class thinker, which makes up about 5% of the people I found that I train, that I coach, that I speak to, that I've hired, that I fired. That's a level of awareness that's different. Their mantra is I'm responsible. They take 100% responsibility. They operate out of love and abundance. They're what I call happily dissatisfied, which means they could do more, but they're okay. They operate internally. They're spiritual. Not that it has to be religious, but they're big into meditation. They're the ones like the billionaires, right? The billionaires pledge they have now. These are the people that are like, hey, I call them the St. Bernards, right? These are just the big old 200-pound St. Bernards. They're like, I'm cool. I got my dungarees on. I got my 15-year-old F-150 out front. It's all good. It's all wonderful. So it's all about a level of consciousness. The problem is we remain in that level of consciousness. And a lot of times the thoughts that are tied to that level of consciousness make us believe we're not capable of things, which just isn't accurate. We have these mantras, like the middle class mantras, like money's the root of all evil, right? Or more money, more problems. You hear this stuff, and it's like you start to now make that part of what I call your linguistic flow. You start to
Mm,
use these terms before you know it. The mind's a powerful thing. So whatever you tell, it's what it's going to find a way to do, right? The people who are the poorest constantly think about money. The people that never find love are the unhappiest. They just constantly put so much effort into it. So these levels of consciousness are basically a mindset. The key is breaking out of your current level of consciousness, getting to the upper level,
mhm.
getting to the world-class level. From there, everything's wonderful, everything's good. There's still problems, there's still issues, but at that point, you're able to better connect and realize that it's about more than just me internally.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, if the audience is anything like me, after hearing this and hearing how emotional intelligence is such a key thing to moving right levels of awareness, right? You have to be aware first of where you're at if you want to be able to target to where you're going and set up that point. Would you talk a little bit about your journey and where'd you grow up? What was your family of origin? What caused you to experience life in such a way that you're able to have this level of awareness now and now be giving back in such an incredible way? Would you talk a little bit about your personal story?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that, and for the kind words. I really appreciate that. I grew up with my grandparents. Actually, my dad left when I was a little child, so I grew up with my grandparents. I was raised in a house with lots of love, but there was really very minimal emphasis put on any type of educational stuff. It just wasn't an important thing for my grandparents. They put a roof over my head. I was like, hey, you got to do what you got to do. Please come home. There was tons of respect in my house. My grandfather was a World War II guy. Tons and tons of respect, but not a whole lot of emphasis was put on the educational component, which was fine
Hmm.
with me. But what I ended up doing was growing up thinking that I was not smart, right? I was like, I'm just not a
Hmm.
smart person. Like, I'm not passing tests. I'm failing. I'm not doing well. But I always did know, Steve, that I could connect with people. That's one thing. Looking back now, I didn't recognize in the moment, but I was always very good at connecting. If there was a problem, if there was an issue, I was the one who they would call, who they talk to. And I always loved that feeling. I still do to today, right? I love getting a phone call in the middle of the night, somebody that thinks to call me when they're having a problem. Like, that's the most
Yeah.
amazing feeling ever. So I think what ended up happening was later on in life, the Marine Corps really taught me. Like, once I started to apply myself, I actually worked for a Fulberg colonel. Colonel Parker was his name. He was like a father figure to me. And he basically helped me to realize that you're smart. You just got to apply yourself. So I
Hmm.
started applying myself. I started getting good grades. Before I knew it, I'm like, I'm really not that stupid. I mean, I'm still kind of dumb, right? But I'm not that dumb. I'm kind of like, but here's the other part too, to kind of dovetail on this a little bit too, Steve. This is the awesome thing, right? Because IQ is your book smarts. You take an SAT, here's your IQ. This is your smartness. You're either smart or not smart. The smarter you are, the better the school you go to, the better the job you get, the more money you make. But here's the thing, there's a whole other component to this that's totally, totally separate from IQ, which comes into the EQ piece of it. So for me personally, I knew there was nothing I could do about my IQ. Unfortunately, there's really not much you can do to increase your level of intelligence unless you're some high paid celebrity and you can pay $500,000 to have somebody take your kid's SAT to get you into a school. Which, by the way, why would she put their kids into USC?
Yeah.
If I'm paying five, you better get me like Harvard or something, or you're like Yale. I'm going to USC.
Hey, it happens. Takes all kinds, man.
But here's the thing, right? So unless you have that, our IQ is our IQ, but our
Hmm.
EQ, every single living, breathing human, regardless of book smarts, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of relationship status, every single person can increase the way that we handle other people, the way we process our emotion, the way that we empathize with others, the way we motivate people, the way we communicate with others. Every single one of us can increase this level. I personally found IQ and EQ are inversely related, I believe. I feel like the smartest, highest IQ people have the lowest EQ. It's like they can't like fight their way out of a wet paper bag, right? But they can solve an algorithm for like molecular dynamics and so it's like, how's that happen? So anyway, I went off on a tangent there.
No,
The
no.
whole thing, the whole thing for me personally was I just feel like it took me to a little bit later in life, but I recognized something that I felt I was pretty good at. Now I'm on a mission to start trying to spread this word of, hey, let's just be kind. And again, I know this sounds like bubblegum and high fives and rainbows and Skittles and shoulder rubs, but it's really not all about that. It's just about recognizing that we have impacts on other people. Every single communication we have with person, we leave that person feeling happy, sad, angry, fearful, or shameful. Both
Yeah.
parties feel that way. So if we have the ability to help somebody just by asking, how are you? Why wouldn't we do that? Why can't we be kind? Why do we have to assume the worst intentions in people? I'll tell you why. It's because the media says we're supposed to. So we have to get much better at making our own decisions. We have to internally decide who we like and dislike. We internally have to decide what we believe and what we don't believe. We have to get away from these people telling us this is the way it's supposed to be and start making decisions on our own.
Yeah. Well, and when we enjoy being in someone's company, a lot of times we say, oh, I can't put my finger on it, but man, I like being with that person. I like being around them. And to transition to your book a little bit, what I loved about your book is if you look at all those snapshots in those chapters, you can very quickly see why you like someone, and you can put a word to what you're hearing or what you're feeling, which is at the core, obviously, of what we're talking about here. But that's really cool. How did you pursue this book when you were thinking about the ideas? Why did you set it up? And if you describe how you set it up and how you would like it to be used by your readers.
100%. And one thing you just hit on, I did want to point on this, Steve. What you just referred to is
Yeah.
what's called effective presence. And effective presence is the ability for people to make others feel good about themselves without even knowing they're doing it. So there's positive effective presence and negative effective presence. What you're referring to is like that it factor. When you communicate with somebody, you walk away and you're like, man, I just feel good. Like I feel like I'm gonna go woohoo. Like that's someone you just communicated with that's high in positive effective presence. It's the ability to convey these feelings to other people without even knowing you're doing it. And here's the cool thing: even if I'm internally am feeling poorly, or I'm not on my game, or I'm sad, or I'm upset, or I'm angry, if I'm strong in positive effective presence, you will still leave feeling better about yourself, even though me internally I don't feel good. That's effective presence. The reason I wrote the book and the way I wrote the book, couple reasons. Number one, I told you I'm a Marine. It's reading and writing is not easy for me, right? So it's like I wanted to write something that I could write in crayon that would print well. So I wanted to write something, a couple things in mind. Number one, I want it to be, I can pick this up and put it down anytime I can get to chapter 1, has nothing to do with chapter 2, has nothing to do with chapter 5. That's number one. Number two, I want it to be very easily digestible for anybody. I'm not a book reader, okay? So I wanted to have something that would just be like a guide. It's there, I use it, whatever. Number three, I want it to be something that just across the board, a high schooler could pick it up or a full-blown adult could pick it up, and they'd both equally walk away, hopefully, understanding what I'm saying. And number two, having some very real life things that can be put into place instantaneously, which is what I love about it. Because you can pick up any chapter, Steve, and go in there and say, okay, show me respect. All right, this is not yes sir or no ma'am. This is making eye contact. This is letting them finish their statement. This isn't cutting them off. It's putting your cell phone away. It's undivided attention to that person. I can do that right now. Let's give it a shot. If you watch conversations from the outside, you'll see they end up being it's not a dialogue, right? It's one person's talking, the other person's listening, they jump back in. Then another person talks, they jump back in. Again, listening with the intent to reply, not with the intent to understand. This is just a very simple guide for deepening all relationships, Steve. Your friend, your neighbor, your spouse, you on your job with what you do, anybody who in sales who was trying to get somebody to do something they want them to do. It's just about a Kuna Matata, right? Lion King, Kuna Matata. No worries. Like it's literally like the 2021 equivalent from the hippies movements from the 1960s. Make love, not war, right? That's really what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, and what I love that I've been able to apply to my own life from looking at the different chapters is, so I tend to be on the spectrum more in an introvert than an extrovert, which a lot of people find kind of shocking. Like this is phenomenal for me, right? We're having a deeper level conversation, just two of us. We can go where we want to go in the conversation. It was structured, it was planned, and at some point, not to your detriment, it will end, and then I have individual time, right? That's how I'm wired. That's something I understand about myself. But what I loved about the chapter is, if I could take this book before I'm going to go out with a bunch of friends that for me I know is going to be pretty taxing, and be like, hey, I want to have an impact. And I don't need to sit and read the whole book. I could take 10 minutes and get through probably, 6, 8 chapters and digest that really quickly. And I have some immediate tools that I can go into that conversation with and focus on, right? Because nothing you say in there is stuff that we probably hadn't heard in our entire life at some point, but it's just not in our immediate working memory. It's tucked way back there, and as soon as it's recalled through the way you set this book up, man, it's able to be implemented effectively in a conversation. And I think that will help us step up our game as we try and impact others in a positive way. Whether we change their mind or not, that's not what I'm saying. Just have an impact that someone will know what I stand for and where I'm coming from, because I can articulate it in a better way.
You bring up an awesome point, Stephen. Here's the whole thing with conflicts, with any type of adversity, anything we deal with. When we get into a situation where we're having an argument, let's say, It's not a matter of you won, I lost, whatever. It's a matter of just making the other person feel like they've been heard, that I truly listened to you, right? And I do a lot with this talking about apologizing, right? When I apologize, it doesn't always accept that I'm wrong and you're right. It just means that I appreciate our relationship more than I appreciate my ego. So when we get in these situations, parties don't have to feel like they won or lost. Just let the person feel like they've been understood, that they've been heard, that I'm comprehending what they're saying. It's okay to do that. The issue is our brains right now have been desensitized to automatically dislike the person the minute that we have a conflicting point of view. There's no
Mm-hmm.
middle ground, right? There's no way to go in between there. So what happens is we get put in these situations. It's called pattern recognition and emotional tagging. Our brain recognizes a pattern. We tie an emotion to it. We have no way to differentiate. So we view all these things through this lens of, of occurrences, things that have happened to us, and it has to go through that lens. So two things could happen to, one thing could happen to you and I both. I have a totally different reaction than you have based on our prior life experiences. If we don't recognize that and appreciate the fact that we can have opposing points of view, emotions are person dependent. Okay, no matter how ill calibrated I think your emotional response is to a situation, you're entitled to that. And your
Mm-hmm.
prior life experiences determine your level of emotional reaction. Who am I or anyone else to say, well, you can't feel that way? I'm 100% entitled to my feelings. It's not you to say I can't feel that way. Now we regulate our emotions. We're aware of your emotions. Now we come back from an empathetic standpoint to say, hey, I've never been in your situation before, but I think I can understand where you're coming from. Explain more. Help me understand this. It's the simplest stuff, Steve. But like you said, it's these things that we just become a society. It's more about social media than social interaction. We're so
Yeah.
hyper focused internally that we don't even recognize others around us, the struggles they're going through, right? The issues they're having, the problems they're having. This whole pandemic, not all of us entered into this with the same level of mental preparedness. Lots of people are still struggling. It's really simple stuff we can do just to make other people feel like they're loved.
Yeah, and what an incredible act it would be in humility to go back to a person that a conversation didn't go well and you were triggered and you lost it, and step aside and take a look at your book, or have some self-awareness and re-engage with that person and be like, hey, I messed up. That, I, as soon as you said this, I turned the switch off.
100%.
I was done. And that, I think, is a really effective tool to go back and be able to apologize to that person and re-engage, because that re-engagement, I think, is a piece that is also missing from our culture. Is as soon as we write someone off, there is no redemption in that. And I think that's a really bad path to go down as a human being, when you all of a sudden start categorizing your network, your friends, your associates in these two categories of, I can work with this, I can't work with that. And then there's never going to be any crossover anymore, because you can agree to disagree on something and still have a really impactful relationship with someone. And whether it's one built out of love, respect, and you love that person, or whether it's more of a utility relationship where you both are using each other for a resource, maybe in a business type setting, that's okay too. But you have to be able to step aside and then re-engage with someone.
100%. We have got to be taught these skills, Steve. We have got to start. Here's the issue. We're relying on adults and parents to teach their kids skills that the adults don't even understand. So it's like, how in the world can you expect kids to have any idea for how to deal with adversity? You look at, like, right now with the pandemic, as horrible as it is, no parent wants their child to experience any type of pain,
Mm,
physical, mental, emotional. But when you step back and look at this, what they're learning right now are coping mechanisms for issues they're going to deal with for the rest of their lives. So
yeah.
as parents, what we have to do is, it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? It's like, do we teach the parents the skills and have them transfer it down to the kids, or we teach the kids the skills and just hope that it's a whole generation that was basically lost, right? It's very difficult to do, but it all comes down to pride too, especially with these
Yeah, man,
disagreements.
that's a good
People,
point.
they can't bite their tongue. Just, you can't. And again, it goes back to, it's not that I'm wrong and you're right. I value our relationship more than I value my ego. If people could do that and recognize that, everything would be much better.
Yeah, and that keys on something that's almost, it's a pet peeve. It's that false humility of like, oh, I can't do this just because I'm prideful. I know it's my ego. It's like, so what, you acknowledge that it's your ego, but that now you can't move forward because that's what you acknowledged it is. It's just like, oh well, I said I know I'm prideful, right? I've acknowledged that, so that makes it okay. No, don't excuse it by acknowledging it. Do something about it. It drives me crazy when people identify that and then don't move past it.
Well, you go back to cognitive dissonance, right? They in their brains recognize that what they're doing is wrong, but their actions are conflicting with it, which creates that dissonance. Their brain tries to correct that by giving them excuses, defense mechanisms for why they're doing what they're doing. That's a problem. And again, if you don't fix that, if you just continue, the definition of insanity, right? It's continue doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. Like if you start to look at your relationships, how deep are they? How many close friends do you have? These are all things that you can really start to recognize that your levels of EQ might be deficient. And I'm not saying this in a horrible way, right? But if you don't know what you don't know, it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. As a matter of fact, I think during the program, you might have said somebody in there knew. I was impressed. I was like, nobody knows what that
Yeah,
is.
no, that there was a guy in there. He was right on with it,
He
man. He was
was.
tracking.
He
Yeah.
was. I'm like, I hope I gave him the correct answer, right? I'm like, geez, whatever. But it's those types of things where it's like we don't have the tools to recognize. And again, it just all starts internally. And again, I think the key takeaway, the main thing here, Steve, is just recognizing that we're all hardwired the same exact way. We're just different variations of the same core psychological blueprints. That's what I say. We all want peace. We all want kindness. We all want love. We all want our kids to grow up happy. We all want to prosper. We all want to be around people that we love. It's so simple to do. But unfortunately, our society is preventing that from happening because we're not allowing people to express their feelings.
Yeah. What does it look like to bring someone like you in? Why is at some level it very important to help bring in a coach and have those mentors in our lives to help us walk through something like this? Would you just talk more practically about what you do with your clients?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, the main thing I've been doing for the last almost 2 decades now is training sales teams. I call it psychological performance training. So this is where I come in and I deal with sales teams and I say, okay, this is where you are. This is where you need to be. I look at things objectively. I look at their results, ask them how good they think they are. Just so happens a lot of salespeople are very delusional. They think they're much better than what they are. They are. It's my thing, right? So I go in there and I ask them critical thinking questions. I talk about levels of thinking, negative thinking, positive thinking, critical thinking. And critical thinking is where a lot of the solutions lie. Critical thinking, decision making based on greater criteria, devoid of emotion. We have a difficult time doing that. We don't want to peel back emotion from things. So my goal is to get into these sales teams to help them to understand that they are 100% responsible for their results. They have total control over their results. It's not the region. It's not the economy. It's not the horrible leads. They have total control over it. That's where it all started for me. Then it kind of morphed, Steve. Like once I wrote the book back in 2002, actually 2 years ago, yesterday, it actually published.
Oh, wow. Right on.
Yeah, when I wrote the book, it was prior to the pandemic, obviously, but I just wrote this book as just something that, again, I know it sounds so bubblegum, but it's just the simplest stuff that anyone can do. Like, if we can make somebody else's life better, why wouldn't we do that? There was actually a story about a suicide survivor by the name of Kevin Hines. I don't know if you ever read about him or saw about him. He survived the jump from the Golden Gate Bridge. Only 19 people have survived. That's actually one of the top places for suicides, unfortunately. And he talked about his suicide. He talked about him attempting suicide. And long story, I'll give you the high level of this.
Yeah.
Any of your viewers, you would definitely want to take a look at his story. It's Kevin Hines, his name. An
Yeah, we'll link
amazing
it up.
story. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll link
amazing
it up.
story.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, it gives me chills, but basically the whole premise behind this is he goes to take his own life. He jumps over the edge of the bridge, and the millisecond he jumps over and his fingers leave, he automatically regrets his decision. He said the millisecond, and he said the other 19 people that have survived the suicide attempt from the Golden Gate Bridge have all said the same thing. The millisecond his fingers left that rail and he regretted it. All he could think about when he was plunging to what he thought was his death was, I'm going to die and nobody's going to know that I didn't want to die. And the whole takeaway from his story is, and this gives me chills because it did change the way I handle other people. He said, all I wanted was somebody to ask me, are you okay? He said, that's all I wanted, just somebody. So it literally still gives me chills, Steve, when I talk about this. How simple is it? The person that you're standing next to in the grocery store that looks like they're having a hard time, hey, how are you doing? Everything cool? Everything cool? Everything all right? What's going on? Nice day today, whatever. Why can't we do that? Like, we have no idea. So if we address people and if we assume that people are relying on our kindness to make their life better, why can't we take that extra breath that it's going to require to say a few words to make that person's day? Why can't we do that? That book is, my book's all about, it's really, that's the summary to it. It's just very simple ways to make people feel like, I love you. I care for you. You're my neighbor. We're all here together. We're all going through difficult times. We're all, I hear that thing too. We're all in the same boat. We're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. The boat we came into the storm on varied based on our level of mental capacity.
Yeah.
Some of us came in a 50-foot yacht that was fully staffed. Some of us came in with a 5-foot inflatable with a hole in the boat and one oar, right? So we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. Assume people need help. Just simple, hi, how are you? Very easy to do. Kevin Hines, very, very strongly recommend your viewers take a look at that, Steve. It's an amazing, incredible, emotional story.
Absolutely. No, we'll definitely link that up to check that out. Well, I want to be absolutely respectful of your time for what we have left here. Would you talk about how my audience can connect with you and what you're doing? And if you would just take a moment to highlight the organization you're a part of, Back the Blue, as we have a lot of first responders that tune into the show, that would be awesome.
100%, Steve. Thank you. I know I talk a lot, man. Here I'm telling you, like, hey, Steve, I got to call after this, and you're the one's got to cut me off. I talk a lot, man. I can't help it.
No, you're
Thank you for
good,
that.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, my website's awesome. It's mentaltoughnessspeaker.com. You can get my book, www.emotionalmarine.com. As far as the We Back Blue that I'm all over social media, also Facebook, Instagram, catching tons of hate on Twitter, all because I wear the bracelets and because I'm a Marine, right? Automatically, I don't like you, right? Whatever. We Back Blue. Yeah, I'm actually the director of communications. We're a national organization, nonprofit. Our whole objective with We Back Blue is going around spreading the love for law enforcement, letting you guys know that there's a ton of support out there. The voices of support are just suppressed right now because you have this very minute part of the population that's bat crazy, and everybody's very afraid to voice their support for you. We get lots of hate, obviously. I mean, you're not any stranger to that. You get lots of hate. We get lots of hate. But what I will say is that voice is very, very small. It's just very loud. So for me personally, I never really got myself too involved with all of that because I knew it was going to create so much controversy and craziness. I finally got to the point, Steve, where this sounds a little crazy, whatever, but I have a lot of friends in law enforcement. I couldn't sit back. Like, I have the platform. Like, all I have to do is go on and deal with death threats for a couple of days and I'm done, right? You guys deal with this stuff every single day. So I'm like, I got to suck this up and do it. So our whole objective is to let law enforcement know you've got support. There's tons of us out there. There's lots of love. The majority of people out there, absolutely, the very vast majority of people know what you do is so critically important. I'm on that mission, again, to let everybody who wears a uniform to know that there are people out there who do care. And unfortunately, you're dealing with a very, very small, minute part of the population who just happens to have a very, very loud voice that everybody bows a knee to. And here's the last thing I'll leave you with, because I feel very strongly in this. Everybody's always asking me, like, what's the solution? What's the problem? How do we correct it? What about the police? The issues with all this. It's very simple to do. Okay. You look at the problems we have right now. It's broken down to three things that are causing all of our issues right now: bad behavioral choices, breakdown of the family structure, and horrible cultural influences. You want to fix all that stuff? Police aren't the problem. We don't have to reimagine policing. We have to reimagine parenting. This all starts at home. Parents have got to start to step up to the plate and understand that you are responsible for your child. So why don't you teach them respect, not just for law enforcement, for the person standing next to you that can provide no benefit to you at all. Be respectful, be kind to this person. It all starts at home. We fix those problems, everything else is okay. We Back Blue. We love law enforcement. We love you guys. We're going all across the country. We're going everywhere we can to spread the word of love. You guys have support, and I'm on a mission to do that.
Right on, man. No, I absolutely love it, and I share in your passion for getting a good word out to people. I got to ask you, is the book available in audiobook form?
You know how many people have asked that question, Stephen? It's not. It's not. I need to. I know.
Okay, I implore you. It needs to happen, because to throw this thing on your way to a meeting, to hear your voice, to hear your passion, it has to be in you reading it. Like, don't get someone. You have to read it. But man, that's the next level of impact with your book. So a side note, but you got to do it, because I would definitely have it and be able to throw that on.
And you used the word nobody else has used, Steve, which is now, you said implore. You implore. That's a very big word with a very fancy definition that I will now, number one, Google to look at the definition. And number two, I will do it, because I would assume that means I definitely should do it. So I'm on it.
You definitely need to do it, because of I will say, in the practical sense, the tool feature of being able to throw that on really quick when you're on your way to a meeting or heading out to an engagement, just to again get back into the working memory of what I need to be doing, how I can impact others. Brother, man, I can't thank you enough for taking this hour that you share with my audience today. I love what you're doing. If there's ways we can support you with the podcast, I'm going to link everything up in the show notes. I hope my audience goes and seeks you out. I hope they get a copy of the book. It's really part of the equation to get through the complex times that we're in, as life has become so easy and it feels so hard. We have to be able to identify that, to be able to overcome these struggles and adversities that we're all facing every day. So I'll just give you some space. You leave a final word for our audience, man.
First off, thank you, Steve. I love this. I love the opportunity to talk shop. I love when we're resonating, right? We're on the same level of thoughts here, which is absolutely amazing. Just being on your show is great. All your viewers, everybody out there, for all the law enforcement people. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. You have tons of love, tons of support. I will be here till the day I die supporting you. And again, you have tons of people out there that are doing the same thing. I'm going to be a voice for that. But thank you all for everything, Steve. We definitely got to talk again. I would love an opportunity.
Yeah.
Anybody that needs help, anybody that wants to talk, anybody that wants, my cell phone number, it's on my website. It's everywhere. You guys can message me, text me. It's on 24/7. I'd love to help any way I can. If there's anything that anybody wants help with that I can provide some sort of benefit, will be awesome. But all that said, thank you, Steve. You're the man for having me. I appreciate the invite.
100%. I can't wait to do it again, man.
Likewise.
There you have it. There is our show with Eric Rittmeyer, and I hope you were writing notes down as quick as you can, or you might actually have to go back and listen to the show again to pick up on some of the things. We took a very high view at a lot of these topics that I hope to have Eric back on, where we can take a little bit deeper dive into some of these areas and maybe flesh them out a little bit for you further than what we were able to do today. But you're going to want to follow Eric in what he's doing. You're going to want to pick up a copy of his book. Go to the show notes, whether you're watching this over on YouTube or you're listening on any of your podcast platforms. Just go to check out the show notes. Leave us a comment. Leave us a rating and review if you would. It takes probably 2 to 3 minutes of your time to leave 1 or 2 sentences. If whatever star rating you see fit and the value that you were able to glean from this conversation, if you would just apply that, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, that would be phenomenal as well. So like I always say, there are plenty of opportunities for you to engage with me. Always feel free to email me, steve@interruptme.org, and I can connect with you there and answer questions. I love those questions. And don't forget, finally, to pick up your Interrupted swag. Go over to the Interrupted store at interruptme.org, where you can find some t-shirts. We have hopefully some hats coming in soon. I'm told by the vendor they will be ready. There's still some delays, unfortunately, what I'm being told, but they are going to be coming down the pike. I've had a lot of requests for those. So be on the lookout. Have some cool new things coming up here in the fall. So I'll be telling you about those in future episodes, and I look forward to having you tune in to our next episode. So with that, thank you for allowing me to interrupt your day.